The story of Heracles, one of the greatest heroes in Greek mythology, is often celebrated as a tale of strength, courage, and triumph. But beneath the surface of his legendary deeds lies a narrative filled with deep sorrow, profound tragedy, and an enduring struggle against forces beyond his control. The tragic truth about Heracles is that while he achieved greatness, his life was marked by relentless suffering, caused not just by the challenges of his 12 labors, but by the darker forces that haunted him throughout his life. Heracles, known to the Romans as Hercules, was the son of Zeus, the king of the gods, and Alcmene, a mortal woman. From birth, he was destined for greatness, embodying superhuman strength and an indomitable spirit. Yet Heracles' path to becoming a hero was far from straightforward. His journey was marred by the wrath of Hera, Zeus's jealous wife, who despised Heracles as a living reminder of her husband's infidelity. Hera's hatred would become the driving force behind much of the tragedy that befell Heracles. To understand Heracles' tragic story, one must first look at the 12 labors, a series of seemingly impossible tasks imposed upon him as punishment. These labors, while showcasing his incredible strength and bravery, were also a form of penance for a horrific crime. In a fit of madness induced by Hera, Heracles murdered his wife, Megara, and their children. This act of violence, committed against those he loved most, was a burden he would carry for the rest of his life. The 12 labors were not only a way to cleanse himself of this sin, but also a constant reminder of the pain and loss that defined his existence. Each labor, whether it was slaying the Nemean lion, capturing the golden hind of Artemis, or retrieving the apples of the Hesperides, pushed Heracles to his physical and mental limits. Yet these feats of heroism were overshadowed by his internal torment. Heracles was a man who could conquer monsters, yet he could not escape the monsters within his own mind. The guilt of his past actions haunted him, driving him to seek redemption through increasingly dangerous and punishing tasks. The ultimate tragedy of Heracles' life is perhaps best encapsulated in the story of Deianira, his second wife. In an attempt to protect her marriage, Deianira unwittingly played a role in Heracles' demise. After being deceived into believing that a poisoned robe would ensure Heracles' fidelity, Deianira gave it to him as a gift. The robe, tainted with the venom of the Lernaean Hydra, burned Heracles' flesh and caused him excruciating pain. In the end, it was this robe that led Heracles to the pyre, where he chose to end his life in a final act of desperate relief from his suffering. Even in death, Heracles' story did not find a peaceful resolution. Although he was granted immortality and a place among the gods on Mount Olympus, the scars of his mortal life remained. The Heracles who joined the gods was not just the triumphant hero, but also a figure who had endured unimaginable pain and loss. His ascension to godhood did not erase the tragedies he had lived through. Rather, it highlighted the complex nature of his character, a hero celebrated for his strength, but defined by his suffering. Heracles' life is a powerful reflection on the duality of heroism and tragedy. He embodies both the pinnacle of human achievement and the depths of human despair. His story teaches us that even the greatest heroes are not immune to suffering, and that true heroism often involves enduring pain and seeking redemption, even when the odds seem insurmountable. In the end, Heracles' tale is a reminder of the complexities of life and the inescapable reality that strength and vulnerability, triumph and tragedy, are often intertwined. What do you think about the tragic truth of Heracles? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're intrigued by the stories of ancient heroes, make sure to check out our other videos. There's so much more to uncover in the rich tapestry of myths and legends that continue to shape our understanding of heroism and humanity.